Well, good morning, and if you're watching this video, that means you clicked on the Mojave Preserve and Teutonia Peak episode where we're in the Mojave Preserve. But in the meantime, I'm out here in the garage. I'm working on a little project. I'm going to try to make some little boxes to protect these little beauties here. These are Coleman 280 lanterns, especially this one. This one is pretty much unfired. It's never even been used. It has the original accessory safe in the bottom that holds a spare generator and a whole bunch of old vintage silk-like metals. And I've also got the original box for that one, which makes this one even more valuable. These things sell for quite a bit on eBay. In fact, I had this one on sale on eBay, and the more I looked at it, the more I decided, I can't sell this thing. I've got probably 40 Coleman lanterns in my collection, and maybe another dozen stoves, and I guess I'm a hoarder. I can't seem to part with them. But anyway, if you clicked on the Mojave Preserve video, it turned out to be a little different for the Mojave Cross than what I anticipated. Originally, I thought I was just going to throw a little bit of history in there and show some video clips of me at the cross, and then we were going to move on to Teutonia Peak. I didn't know there was as much history and unique things about the Mojave Cross until I got home. I did a little more research, and I discovered all that went on in the Mojave Cross. I'm in the garage so you can hear cars moving. And while I'm out here working on these boxes for these incredible Coleman 208 lanterns, I hope you watch the Mojave Cross video all the way through the initial parts, about 8 minutes before I actually get to the part where me and Dave and Gerry are climbing around the rocks and we're talking about it. And then of course we move on to Teutonia Peak. But I thought it was very interesting. I think you will too. And next time you head out to the desert, when you're on your way to Vegas, or you're just exploring Joshua Tree or the Mojave Preserve for the day, take a moment to stop by the Mojave Cross, pay your respects to all the hard work and dedication that Henry Sandos and Wanda put into keeping the memorial in the middle of the desert in California. So anyway, hope you enjoy the episode, the Mojave Cross and Teutonia Peak episode that'll be coming up next. Stay tuned. In the meantime, I gotta get sawing out here. It's a little chilly this morning. Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Journal. In this episode, Dave, Gerry, and I continue our exploration of the Mojave National Preserve, the Mojave War Memorial Cross, and Teutonia Peak. Now, back when I was planning our adventure into the Mojave Preserve, there were several locations I knew we just had to visit. Now, since the preserve is out in the middle of nowhere, there's really no reason to be out driving around the desert, especially in the hotter summer months, unless you're heading to Vegas to lounge around in the pool or maybe hang out in the air-conditioned casino like Mother Nature intended. Now, one of my locations that I wanted to see was a large white cross mounted on top of a rock in the middle of the preserve. Now, I'm not what you call a religious guy, but this cross had special meaning for me. You see, it's a war memorial cross dedicated to those soldiers that died serving their country. Now, since I served in the United States Army, I felt an obligation to pay my respects. The cross stands on Sunrise Rock, a granite outcropping adjacent to Sema Road, about 12 miles south of Interstate 15 and 6 miles north of Sema, California, which is also the trailhead that leads to Teutonia Peak on the other side of the road. It's about 1,300 feet north of the monument, and we'll get to that in a minute. The cross was erected in 1934 by a prospector named John Riley Bembry, who also served as a combat medic way back in World War I, and was one of the original veterans who established the monument, erected the cross, and took care of it over the years. Now, Bembry later became friends with Wanda and Henry Sandos, who lived nearby, who he entrusted with the monument's care after his passing in 1984. However, in the year 2000, a U.S. National Park superintendent showed up and asked Henry to take down the cross. He was told that they had received a complaint from Frank Buono, who was the former official at the Joshua Tree National Park, that the erection of the religious monument on federal land violated the separation of church and state guidelines, and he demanded the cross be removed.
I want the cross on every Catholic church. I want the cross in my home, but I don't want the cross to be permanently placed on federal government public lands, or any other public lands for that matter.
Now, Henry adamantly refused. Henry's decision to take a stand led to a legal battle over the memorial cross that eventually reached all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Henry said, Everybody in the area knew why that cross was there. We realized this country wouldn't be what it was without our veterans, said Wanda, his wife of over 50 years. To me, I know it sounds corny, but that cross out here in the middle of nowhere is just as important to me as the Vietnam Memorial and all of those memorials in Washington, D.C. Now, sure, they're beautiful and impressive and wonderful, I admit it, but they also say the same exact thing that cross does sitting out here in the middle of the desert. The next year, in 2001, the ACLU filed a lawsuit arguing that the cross was unconstitutional since it was located on government land. Lower federal courts agreed, ordering the removal of the cross and prohibiting Congress from transferring the cross and the land on which it sat to the VFW. Now, the judges ordered a heavy bag padlocked over the cross to cover it up during the appeals process. Later on, the bag was replaced by a wooden box. Now, this I found kind of amusing because I had read for the last 10 years that on one weekend the off-roaders and veterans would remove the wood covering the cross, and a few days later the ACLU would show up and cover it back up again. This went on for years and years during the ongoing legal battle. 9 years later, on April 28, 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the lower court's ruling and stated that there was in fact no violation of the separation of church and state when Congress transferred the land surrounding the cross on Sunrise Rock to the VFW, and upheld the constitutionality of law passed by Congress in 2003 that allowed the transfer of the memorial and the land upon which it stood to the VFW. But here's the catch. It was in exchange for land somewhere else in the Mojave Desert that was owned by Henry Sandos. So Sandos donated a portion of his own land in the Mojave Desert in exchange for the right to keep the cross on Sunrise Rock. That's genius. Now, writing for the majority, Chief Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote, "The goal of avoiding governmental endorsement of religion does not require the eradication of all religious symbols in the public realm." Okay, so you think the story ends there? Well, not so. Less than 2 weeks later, on the night of May 9th and 10th, Embry's War Memorial Cross was cut down and stolen from its place on Sunrise Rock. National Park Service spokeswoman Linda Slater said that a $125,000 reward was being offered for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the thieves. The VFW promised that the memorial would be rebuilt. There was a legal fight that someone just made personal to 50 million veterans, military personnel, and their families, said National Commander Thomas J. Treadwell. In an interesting turn of events, the Desert Dispatch, which was a local desert newspaper, they were contacted by somebody claiming to have a message from the person who removed the cross. The message claimed that the cross had not been damaged or destroyed, but moved by someone who objected to the cross being on public land. The message also claimed that a non-sectarian memorial had been brought to the site, but that because of unspecified technical difficulties, it was prevented from being put in place of the cross. Now, after the theft was reported in somewhat another odd reference, an atheist organization called the Atheist Alliance International offered $5,000 to go toward replacing the cross, but with a more inclusive and non-religious veterans memorial. But that gesture was simply ignored by religious groups who insisted that the cross be restored. Just a few days later on Wednesday, Linda Slater of the Mojave National Preserve said that Henry Sandos and the Preserve Rangers agreed that the cross found 2 days earlier in San Mateo County was indeed the cross stolen from Sunrise Rock in 2010. Okay, so it keeps getting weirder. How's this? On May 20th, just a few days later, park rangers discovered that a new replica of the cross stolen 10 days earlier was now bolted to the base of the original. Now, park personnel removed it and placed it into evidence. Now, Linda Slater said, well, since that replica is not the original disputed cross, it had to come down. Okay, so a few years later, on April 12, 2012, U.S. District Court Judge Robert J. Timlin signed an order ending the ACLU's lawsuit, paving the way for the transfer of the original memorial site on Sunrise Rock to the VFW. Just a few months later, on Veterans Day, November 11, 2012, 200 supporters turned out for a special Veterans Day celebration, which included the long-awaited restoration and rededication of the new Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross. At the ceremony, Henry and Wanda Sandos, members of the VFW, and members of the American Legion took turns reflecting on this historic moment, a moment 11 years in the making. Wow, who would have thought this little cross out here in the middle of nowhere would have stirred up such controversy? Now, Henry Sandoz sadly passed away at the age of 76 in 2015. After all, the Mojave War Memorial Cross was on our way to Teutonia Peak, so we thought we owed it to ourselves to make a stop. Well, behind me is it's called the War Memorial Cross out here in the Mojave Desert. This cross was erected years and years ago in honor of all those military service members that lost their lives during all of the wars over the years. And this was also the scene of some controversy. Years ago, this was also the scene of some controversy because years ago, I think it was the ACLU decided that they thought it was inappropriate to have a cross on federal land, and that they didn't approve of the cross as a religious symbol. It's really windy here, so hopefully you can hear me okay. So they got plywood and they covered up the cross so you couldn't tell it was the shape of a cross. Then a couple days later, all the four-wheelers and off-roaders came here and they took it all down, which I thought was kind of funny. Then the next weekend, ACLU came back and they put it back up, and this was an ongoing battle for several months where they would cover up the cross and then the off-roaders would uncover the cross, and eventually the ACLU sued, and it went to, I guess, federal court, superior court, Supreme Court, I don't know, one of them, and supposedly they lost because what they had done is that they had changed it from a memorial, from a cross as a religious symbol to a war memorial. So because it got the notification that it's a war memorial, I guess they were allowed to keep it. So here it stands, the War Memorial in the Mojave Preserve. And this nice cold day here in the winter. Well, we did the Rings Trail, the Hopewell campground, earlier today. We just drove by the Mojave Cross, which is a war memorial, and right across the street is the trailhead for Teutonia Peak. And Teutonia Peak is right behind us here, and it's about a 4.5 mile hike round trip. It's going to go pretty quick. It's really windy here. It's about ready to blow the camera over. It goes through one of the densest Joshua tree populations anywhere in the United States. And a lot of it's been burned by a tragic fire that went through here a few years ago, but we're going to make our way to the top of the peak. We don't freeze to death. It's cold here today. All right, well, we've started down the Teutonia Peak Trail. It's going to be about 4 miles or so round trip to get to the peak. And we're going to be hiking through one of the densest Joshua tree forests in the United States. It's a shame it all burnt down, but still pretty interesting. It's cold here today. And at least right now the winds that are back. Coming back from the peak, it's going to be chilly. I can't imagine the breeze from the top. It's going to be bone chilling, I have a feeling. It's all part of the adventure.
So it looks like we continue straight and we scramble. Oh yeah, I see somebody. Yeah.
All right, we're still climbing. We're nearing the summit of Teutonia Peak. It's not too much farther. Well, this looks like a little bit of a rock scramble toward the end here.
Nothing like that often.
Yep, that's true. All right, we've got a little bit of rock scrambling here as we work our way up to the top of Teutonia. I read that it was a jagged rock outcrop. Oh wow, check out the view on the other side. Wow, look at that. Whew. Got a little more to go. That's it. Up there somewhere. Well, we're at the top. Or so we think. There's really there's really no way to get to the top there of Teutonia. That's the spot, huh? Oh yeah, look at that breeze. Whew. What a view from here. Wow. This will cool you off in a hurry. Whew. Tremendous view. This has got an incredible view from up here on the top of Teutonia Peak. Both directions. Well, we made it to the top of Teutonia Peak. It's a little cold and windy. We found this little mini cutout, this little cave here near the top of Teutonia. We're going to stop here and have lunch. It wasn't too bad of a climb. 2 miles to get up here, so 2 miles to get back. Tremendous views from up here. We can see off toward Baker. We can actually see semis heading north on the 15, heading to Vegas. And also see them down at the other end too. So tremendous views of all the burn areas and all the Joshua tree groves. And some magnificent rock outcroppings up here on Teutonia. So we're going to stop here for a bit, have a bite to eat, and head back down to the car. On our way back from Teutonia Peak, we decided to head out a little cross-country in the desert to try to find the largest Joshua tree in the area. At one point, we saw a big pile of fur. From what animal it was a mystery. The odd part of our extended journey across the burned-up Joshua tree forest was the sudden end of the burn area. Here, the Joshua trees somehow avoided the searing heat and flames of the dome fire, and they looked miraculously unharmed. We took a short moment to snap a group photo before we headed back to our vehicles. It was cooling off, and we were ready to find a campsite for the night. Since there were no dedicated campgrounds near here, we'd have to find a suitable spot to set up a remote camp. That is, without any amenities like picnic tables or fire pits or restrooms. Luckily, I had downloaded a series of GPS coordinates for some overlanding campsites from another off-roader, and one of them was nearby, just behind the Mojave Cross across the street. We headed back past the Mojave Cross and down a dirt road into the desert. Within a few minutes, we spotted what was the first of several excellent spots. Problem was, they were out in the open and receiving the full brunt of that cold wind. Without any real tree cover, this would be a tough camp. We continued back along the dirt road for another mile or so and came upon a large group of boulders that blocked the wind, a perfect sight. Well, I've got my G stove going and poured some water into my kettle. I've got that on. It's not quite at a rolling boil, but it's really close. And once it gets rolling, I'm going to get out my Mountain House meal and I'm going to cook me up some beef stroganoff tonight. All right, I'm at a rolling boil here. So it's time to add some water to my Mountain House beef stroganoff with noodles. I'm gonna have to guess at how much to put in it. If not, I'll have beef stroganoff soup. Steaming pretty good. You can see that. Make sure you get all the little bits from the bottom. You don't want to get halfway through your meal and bite down into a bunch of powder. Don't ask me how I know that. I'm gonna add a little more water. This probably have to set about 9 minutes, I imagine. 8 minutes, something like that. Enough for the noodles to soften up and the beef to not be crunchy. The wind's still blowing, but it's not as bad. All right, zip this closed and let it sit for a bit. I can have my dinner.
Yep, pretty big hole there, huh? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, Dave leaned.
Well, good thing it's only like a $20 jacket.
Oh, is it? It's not like a Patagonia
No,
or anything, is
no,
it?
it's Costco, but I got a blue one and a black one.
Oh.
I guess I'll have to look again. Fuck.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, what going? Oh, well.
Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Journal, the Mojave Cross and Teutonia Peak. In this final part of our Mojave Preserve adventure, we wake up to a chilly desert and another magnificent sunrise. We pack up camp and head 5 miles east of Kelbaker Road on the unpaved Aiken Mine Road to try to find and explore the lava tubes. One of the most popular attractions in the Mojave National Preserve is the 500-foot-long lava tube cave. The lava tube formed when hot liquid magma flowed like a river underground from an active volcano millions of years ago. The Mojave Preserve lava tube also has 2 skylights that illuminate the inside of the cave, and if we time it just right, the sun lines up with the main skylight and a shaft of light beams down through the ceiling, making for some outstanding pictures. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure of the Journal, the lava tubes of the Mojave Preserve, coming up next. Oh, and one last thing, don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and be sure and hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel to get the latest editions as I post them. Anyway, take care, and I'll see you in the next edition of the Journal. Bye-bye. Melted.
Yeah, it melted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're lucky it wasn't a really expensive jacket.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that is the good part.